28 seconds.
27.
26.
25 seconds.
24. 23.
22 seconds.
21 seconds.
22 seconds. 19.
18.
17 seconds.
16.
15 seconds.
14.
13 seconds.
12. 11.
10 seconds. 9.
8.
7.
6.
6 what?
Copy.
5 seconds.
3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to Subspace Chatter, where we boldly go into discussing Star Trek. Today, we're going to be discussing the 7th episode of Lower Deck's new season called A Mathematically Perfect Redemption. So let's go around and do introductions. I'm Scott. I'm hosting this week and also host of the YouTube channel Opinions No One Cares About.
Hi, I'm Vanessa, and I host a YouTube channel called I Love Bad Star Trek.
Hi, I'm Dan. I'm the editor of the Star Trek website, warpfactorytrack.com.
Hey, I'm Eve. I'm with the Starfleet Academy College of Music.
Hi, Captain Mike. I run a couple of Facebook groups, actually. Star Trek Early Voyages and Worlds of Tomorrow. You can check them both out on Facebook if you're ever cruising around on that social media.
All right, well, let's get to the questions. First up, what was the funniest part of this episode? Anyone? Throw it out there.
I think the funniest part of the episode was just how the ending played out. It felt very almost like Scooby-Doo, where they found out that Peanut Hamper was behind the whole invasion. Oh my God. Like it that to me was great. I loved how they went about that.
When Peanut Hamper and I can't remember the name for partner, but when they're like getting together, I thought it was funny when he turns around because they're like through a fountain, and you see like the wings form a heart.
That was really well animated, yeah.
For me, I have to go with when they lock away Peanut Hamper and you get to see who she's with.
Yes.
That was the payoff. The payoff was worth it.
Right.
I'm pretty much forced to agree with Eve. Like when they're throwing her in the clink at the end, it was the best.
I almost think for me it was when. Does anyone remember the name of the village leader? I can remember Rodwa, but not his father's name. And I literally just watched this last night.
Yeah, I was just watching it earlier, and it's still the same thing. Like his name gets mentioned many times. His dad, no.
Yeah, it's a long weekend here, so I watched it again last night, but I wasn't fully in control of my mental capacity, so I can't remember his name either.
Yeah, I think it's for me is when he was coming towards her with a knife. He's like, "What are you gonna do?" And he starts like scraping stuff off, and she's like, yeah. He's like, "Don't stop and do the left side." It was great.
That gave me sort of a Star Wars vibe, like C-3PO when Luke finds him, and he's like, "Oh boy, this oil bath is gonna feel so good." That's what
Right?
that's the first thing that popped into my head.
Right. Okay, so as I said, the episode's called A Mathematically Perfect Redemption. So what might that refer to? Like, who or what got redeemed here? Because in the end, really nobody did.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to say it's probably mostly referencing Peanut Hamper. I don't know, with the machines and the math and everything. It's just talking about her. But like you say, I guess it's like an ironic title, really, because in the end, like, is she really redeemed?
Yeah.
The title to me gave me Big Bang Theory vibes. Like when I saw it, it looks like some of the unusual titles you get if you watch The Big Bang Theory, because they have these overly convoluted titles.
Very true. What do you think, Dan?
Well, I was thinking about the final scene actually, and it being mathematically perfect, and yeah, how like Agamus, I think that's his name, like, doesn't seem to have like a friend before that, but like now he does, sort of thing. Even though it's they didn't have a disagreement beforehand, but they could have had, in which case it would have been a redemption.
Sure. And Peanut Hamper did say, that she'd like calculated that name because it was mathematically perfect when we first met her. I don't know as far as redemption goes. What do you think, Vanessa?
Yeah, I didn't I think like Mike said, I do think it's an ironic title because the entire thing was investing in Peanut Hamper's story. There may have been like a tangential comment on the owl folk. Does anybody remember the name?
I remember the planet's called Areola, and
that
was also a very funny part.
Areolans.
Yeah,
I think they're the Areolans. The Areolans, like they certainly like rediscovered their own past, but I don't necessarily think that they were redeemed necessarily. Like they got back in touch with something that had been sort of like forbidden to them. That's a very common trope with this kind of thing, but I think it was mainly about Peanut Hamper and how unredeemable seemingly that this being is.
Weird thought on that title that just popped into my head. We're looking at redemption through almost a religious or spiritual sense. What if we took it more literally in that first contact protocols were violated and stuff like that, and they got Peanut Hamper back, and in the end there isn't too much damage to the culture because they already had those things in their past? So what if that's the kind of that? So what if in that sense it's also a mathematically perfect redemption, meaning there's not going to be too much damage to the culture by removing Peanut Hamper? Like I'm thinking redeeming, like you would redeem an item as opposed to redeeming a soul.
That's a bit debatable because she has betrayed the trust of an entire tribe of people. She has facilitated the destruction of their village by being invaded. Like, didn't they like shoot down everybody's house? That past was rediscovered mainly because, that was sort of her pushing and doing. And like, another sort of mini question I had was like, how did they know how to fly that stuff if it was buried there for so long? Like,
well,
I think her interference is that's sort of like what the Prime Directive is actually like meant to prevent, is like sort of making a mess. And I think she made a mess and they're just sort of like having to live with it when she leaves.
Like cultural contamination, basically.
Like I say, it was just something that popped into my head.
Yeah.
Like,
no, I'm not like trying to like.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah.
It's okay. I just like I have a weird brain.
No, it makes sense. Although I do think like the Prime Directive that tends to, isn't it specifically about developing cultures? And you've got this culture which isn't so much pre-warp as like post-warp.
Honestly, I swear the Prime Directive is there when it's convenient and abused when it's not. So.
Right.
It's the sometimes Prime Directive.
Yep, like any plot device, it gets brought in sometimes and it gets left by the wayside other times.
Okay, so how much did showrunner Mike McMahon have to do with this episode personally? I asked this question because this whole race of bird people immediately made me think of his time on Rick and Morty. I like immediately gravitated to bird person. Even more so than like seeing Dr. Miglimoo.
I got a lot of Rick and Morty out of this too, to be honest. Like this felt to me a little bit more like Rick and Morty with a Star Trek skin in a way.
Okay.
And I thought it was interesting when I tweeted in defense of this episode and you replied, "It's a great episode."
Tweeted, and it's about bird people.
Yeah.
I thought like not just the bird people and the Birdman, but also like the very last scene where the machine is put in the prison with all the other machines. Like Rick had to do that same thing. So it felt like that trope of like the super jail kind of thing. So
well, from what I've heard about like his other series, Solar Opposites, it seems like it's like about civilization and the wall and stuff like that. So
that's true.
There's like a wall of AI.
Yeah, there's a subplot about that where they take like random people and they like shrink them down and then they live in their wall.
Sure, I've heard.
Yeah, I couldn't get into that one as much, but anyway. So how do you feel about an episode that focused on something other than the Fab Four? Like, does that add or take away from the story, the overall storyline so far?
I'd definitely say, yeah, it's like I was actually pretty into the past couple episodes, and this one comparatively, it was just, I don't know. It's like that episode of Star Trek Voyager where you see the Silver Blood crew from that planet, that Demon class planet they landed on, and it's just like it's like a go nowhere plot line that really doesn't affect main character developments or any developments within the main plot or the main setting of the show, right? Like the Cerritos shows up like in the last, I don't know what, the last quarter of the episode maybe.
Yep.
And the interactions of the crew, it's not really a lot of focus on them. It's more on the implications of Peanut Hamper and interactions with this tribe. It's like, I mean, there was good jokes. I mean, even the questions within the plot themselves were interesting. But like right back to the core question you mentioned, right? Like, you know, it's just it's not about Boimler, Tendi, Rutherford, or like, you know, I mean, it's not focused on Mariner, any of the four of them. Like, just no real focus at all. They just show up as a kind of like as supporting characters, like in the last 10 minutes or so, really, where they just resolve it. It's like but I mean, they've done episodes like this in Star Trek in the past where it's like diverts completely away from the main cast, and I don't know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I found it didn't work for me much in this episode, but I mean, the last couple I thought were great. This one, yeah, it was effective.
So much like the TNG episode Lower Decks.
Well, yeah. I was
yes
thinking
and
about
no, because Lower Decks tied up Ensign Sito.
Yeah, and she comes back from an episode previous.
Yeah.
Plus
the
it
first
ties.
duty.
Yeah, there's a bit of stuff with Worf too there involved with his security team, and it kind of relates to a bit to what the crew's doing. But like you say, it's changing the perspective entirely, much like this is same thing, shifting the focus away.
I totally thought recently about the history of those sort of episodes, and I couldn't remember any in the original series. The only one, the initial ones that I could remember were all in TNG, like Eye of the Beholder, which obviously is quite Troy centric, but like I've always thought it does focus on like Daniel Kwan quite a lot as well, and you know,
Masks.
Well, Mask is a data episode, but yeah, like Lower Decks, the first GTE, the Barclay episodes, like those.
TOS has something like that. It's like the Menagerie is probably the closest thing you get to that, where it's like diverting focus away to showing you Pike's crew for portions of the episode where they're cutting away to footage that they used from the cage. So yeah, it's probably about as close as you get, though. Like it's always focused primarily on Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and then the rest of them is supporting characters on the ship usually, or in a landing party or something like that. But yeah. Not very often do they ever change focus away from those characters.
This one felt like the only tie that they had from anything previous was we have seen exocomps before, but other than seeing exocomps before, it just didn't feel like it was tied to. It feels like a filler episode, if that makes sense. Not a bad episode, just filler.
Perfect. Yeah, I'd say that too.
Okay.
I honestly like to sort of like sum up the question again, like how does this, does this divert from the main plot or whatever? And to that, I'd say, what plot? I haven't seen any real overarching story with these characters.
But it's not plot. It's not plot. It's character development. This is meaningless character development. This is meaningless character development. Yeah, it is. There was 2 episodes that just went by where we got a whole bunch about Devana Tendi and a whole bunch about Samantha and Rutherford, and we just hadn't known much about them till now. But now it's like, wow, the story of this exocomp. Wow, wonderful. But what does that mean going forward? She's in jail now. Who cares anymore?
Yeah, it's a loose end that was from a season previous that I think was actually a good idea to sort of tie up, like, what happened to this thing.
That did work.
And I also appreciated that they are, as Dan actually talked about in the group chat, like they're experimenting with different formats, and I appreciate that as well.
That's what I liked also about Wedge Dooge, like last season as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And as far as like the character development of all the other crew, I mean, they do it at such a snail pace that like one more episode of them not developing, I don't think it's really going to affect too much, honestly. And this was a fun episode. It was a good distraction.
Yeah.
Like I say, not bad filler, just filler.
Yeah.
Like a Ferengi
Exactly.
episode.
Oh, I love a good Ferengi episode.
I think
Some
some
of the
people have
Ferengi
been,
episodes are my favorite in DS9.
Except I'll agree. Except Prophet and Lace, you're never going to get me to like that one.
Nope.
Ditto.
I think some people have been irritated by not only like the experimentation of how experimental the episode is, but also like the particular character that it focuses on is at least potentially, so like irritating.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, totally. She's just an annoying pain in the ass.
She reminds
I mean,
her way of talking reminds me of the movie Mean Girls.
Oh gosh.
That's what like I wanted. Like when I heard her talking and the way she speaks and the way she acts, I just wanted to like pick up a baseball bat and then like just let her have it.
Honestly, I don't see her as like being that different from the Lower Decks cast. I really don't. Honestly, like there's some
she's not a team player at all. Like Mariner may have her days, but they get together and they do things as a team. This one's garbage with a couple of legs bolted on. Like just
but like as far as like temperament, self-interest, impulsivity, I don't see a huge difference between the two.
Well,
she was cruel though. Like she's cruel the way she talks to people if you really listen, and she does it deliberately. Whereas Mariner, even being Mariner, is not deliberately cruel. Mariner's just sarcastic because that's who
she can be inconsiderate, but she knows sometimes she goes over the line. This one doesn't care. There's no apologies.
Yeah,
sorry, I'm an asshole. Whatever, that's just me. It's like okay, whatever.
Now you sound like her.
Nails on the chalkboard every time she talks.
Well, I'm more irritated by Badgie.
Oh yeah, he's intentionally annoying as well, very much by design.
Yep.
I enjoyed how like delightfully violent he was. Like this, like it was like a sort of like evil paperclip on Microsoft Word. They used to have like an animated paperclip that would give you tips on Microsoft Word, and Badgie was like an evil version. I love that.
Yep. Going to burn your eyes in a fire.
Can you imagine if her and Badgie teamed up?
Oh no.
That's some scary, angry intelligences that don't like people much.
And then throw Agamus in there as the mastermind. We'd have the holy trinity of evil machines.
I'll never complain about more Jeffrey Combs in Star Trek.
Well, like
very true.
My point was that like I think they use Peanut Hamper to like create a contrast of like this is bad behavior and whereas others are good. I don't think the contrast is as sharp as it could be. Is what I'm trying to say. I don't really see the two like being so wildly like different morally that like that the point that they're trying to make is made.
One facet of the episode I thought was really interesting was that before the very end, like you've got Peanut Hamper reacting, sour or whatever you want to say, to like these like the bird people, the Cerritos crew. But then, like, I found it quite interesting that in the last scene, she's even like spiteful, basically, to like all the AIs. So it's not just organic beings that she's like.
There's like somewhere at the halfway point in the episode, she even admits herself that she's not a good person. He's like, you're good. Like the fella there from the tribe, he's telling her, and she's like, no, I'm not good. And it's like, good. I'm glad you can admit that because you are not good by any metric.
Weird question because somebody mentioned the feet. Did anyone else feel like her feet were modeled on the Porygon Pokemon? Because the way her feet just kind of go back and forth reminds me of playing Pokemon Go and seeing the Porygon moving its feet back and forth, and they're like wedge shaped like that. Like she almost like reminded me of like a Pokemon.
Well, if they were,
I can't speak to that.
the
I was,
the TNG ones would be like from.
I was
Quality of
thinking
Life.
of what was it? Ripley's boots from Aliens, the stompers, those big stompers she wears. Yeah,
Oh,
it's kind of reminded me of those a bit. Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's get way less serious. How'd you guys feel about Peanut hooking up with Birdman? Like, how would you say it was different or similar to, say, Data and Tasha Yar?
It was at least consensual.
Consent is important.
I mean, yes. Well, the thing is, like, Data and Tasha were under the influence of some sort of contagion on the ship.
Polywater.
More Tasha than Data, but with this, it was a reciprocal attraction, intention, consensual. Both of them wanted to accomplish the same thing, but we're just like mechanically like, how are we going to make this work kind of thing, right?
Oh my god, that line just was so cringe with the whole we got different parts. I felt like I was listening to George Lucas's writing when he tries to write Anakin and Padme love scenes. It was so cringe.
I thought it was brilliant because, yeah, like you say, like the comparison between them and like Data and Tasha Yar will lose the aspect of obviously Data is humanoid, whereas Peanut Hamper isn't.
Yeah.
What was it? I watched, what was it? I think it was like Blade Runner 2049 right around the same time because it came out just recently in history, right? This day in history kind of thing. And I was watching it. I watched it and then I watched that episode right after. And Kay, he's like him and his hologram girlfriend like have some kind of relationship. So it's like, I don't know, people falling in love with AIs or machines.
But like,
I don't know.
but Joy was kind of like a tethered sort of servant programmed to please the protagonist, whereas like Peanut Hamper,
She was
like
still adaptive AI,
like,
still an adaptive AI though. It was just programmed to be
yeah
engrammatic or something. It was like coded to a person's engram or something, so it reacts to everything you do.
I was afraid for a minute we'd end up with a scene like the Deep from The Boys, and I was glad they didn't go there because being Rick and Morty writers, I could totally see that happening otherwise. I was like, please, please, please don't let this be the Deep. Thinking octopus.
Yeah, that's some awkward stuff in there.
Yeah.
And honestly, like
cringe.
Like implicitly, like, you know, there may come a time when two human beings are together and they're like, oh, we have like equipment that, you know, we can sort of figure out a way to make this work kind of thing. I don't know if that's obviously not a perfect parallel, but that's another thing to glean from it.
Right.
I gotta wonder in the future if, just out of curiosity, if because AI nowadays is moving more and more towards humanoid AIs and stuff. I gotta wonder if in the future that's going to be a potential like orientation for relationships, like people who are, because I know Futurama explored it with the term, like they did that one where Fry got obsessed with the Lucy Liu robot.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm kind of wondering if in the future we might have to add a few more letters or something to the rainbow flag just to kind of think, because that would be a whole other thing. And then you'd have to get into how would you consent with the machine? Like, because machines for the most part are programmed to do what they're told. So,
well, you mentioned Measure of a Man. If like robots or androids eventually, you know, gain sentience, I don't see how that would necessarily be like a different orientation. But it would just be like another member of the human race. You know what I mean? Like it wouldn't be like some thing, some sort of like fetish or something. It would just be like, oh, they just happen to be a robot. Yeah.
I wasn't thinking like a fetish, but I was thinking you would see like there would be some people who would be totally against it. There would be some people who'd be totally for it. And there'd be some people who'd be like, yeah, it's okay to do, but it's not my thing is what I'm thinking.
Didn't Blade Runner sort of get into that?
I don't remember.
Synthetics, yeah, that's like the whole question about that. There's like a bunch of that. Like I think 2049, there's a brothel of you know girls that are all like, you know, like he's a Blade Runner, he's a Blade Runner. They're all freaking out because, like,
but they're like all
he could
they're
be
all,
hunting
like,
them for all they
they're
know,
like-
right?
they're like uniformly objectified, and like having an actual relationship with a synth is like forbidden. Like you're not really supposed to do that. Like,
Yeah.
so the protagonist like forming a bond, a relationship with somebody was actually like kind of supposed to signal that they were evolving.
There's no laws against it. It's just they only live for 4 years.
No, but they're
prior
lower
to that
class.
prior to that first
Right.
movie or whatever.
They're like a lower class. It would be like dating somebody beneath you or something if you
Caste
dated a synth.
system.
Oh yeah, that's like
Like a
Jared Leto's character in that movie is totally like cyberpunk Pharaoh. It's like my army of slaves will conquer the stars. Like, yeah, definitely sounds like the Egyptian Pharaoh a lot in language.
See, yeah,
Right.
to me, from what Vanessa's saying, I'm thinking along lines of like a caste system, like how in some countries certain castes do not mingle with other castes because, like in some countries, you have untouchables, and to mingle with the untouchables is just like, no, you don't do that. So,
Well, I mean, it is basically asserted that Rick Deckard goes into hiding with her because, like, they're going to try and dismantle their child, figure out how to make replicants that can reproduce. So, yeah, it becomes like pretty oogie business. Like, you know, it's like you say, it's not hard to trample people who are basically just manufactured slaves.
Yeah, that's true.
Probably to tie it into what we're talking about with this character, like in her episode here, like that's kind of resentment she bears at a few points in the story where it's like, oh yeah, just serve the bipedals, just do what they need me to do. A couple times she goes off on that tangent. It's like, yeah, like I mean, if we're building stuff, you know, that's like artificial intelligence, is when are they going to start asking questions about, like, you know, what about my agency? And that seems to be this character has a real beef with like bipedal life that's like organic, that attitude.
Yeah. And
Well,
speaking of agency, sorry.
So I would, sorry, Sky, I apologize.
Right.
I was just gonna say we did, you know, like on the, you know, recap of the end of the story, they were sending the XComp to its death, essentially.
Yeah.
So it's like maybe it has a chip on its shoulder justifiably, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like it's like the replicants in Blade Runner. They want to rebel. Why? Because they're sick of being trampled.
Yeah. Yeah. So, did the end surprise you guys when Peanut went to machine jail? No. If not, what was your reaction?
No, she got what she deserved. It was funny how she kind of played nice for a bit in this episode. It's like you're almost like, wow, she's helping these people. How progressive of her. And then all of a sudden, it's like, yeah, well, I sent out the signal, and they're the reason they're here. And it's just like, whoa, oh my, maybe you should go to jail.
Yeah, she's kind of in the right place. Like, really, the only thing that makes her different from all these other sentient computers is like she can move around on her own. That actually makes her more dangerous.
And
Also,
has a replicator.
Yeah.
yeah, she has the replicator. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
And although for me, I wasn't surprised she went to machine jail because I'm like, there's no way she's as good as she's pretending all of a sudden. And the thing with watching a lot of Rick and Morty is, you know, the writers are notorious for subverting expectation anyway. So that's which is what they've done here. But for me, for me, it was hearing Agamos at the very end as her next door cellmate, and I'm like, oh yeah,
Right?
Bring it.
I mean, that's. Oh, sorry. Anybody else?
I thought it was strange. Like, why did they even have a jail for machines? Why wouldn't they just take it apart if it's so dangerous? Do they jail? Yeah, jail presume. Yeah, measure of a man. So there's like, but that was for androids. This is an XComp, which is a different type of.
But she's got a lot of the intelligence of an android. She's got some sense of AI sentience.
So like,
computer.
So is the point to like reform them? Maybe I'm thinking too deeply about this cartoon, but like, is the point to reform the machines? Because it's like, okay, they're just gonna lock them away forever. What if what if the jail malfunctions? What if, you know, like, do they feed them? Like, what do they do to like pass
Maybe it's a
isn't
lab.
humane. So
Maybe it's
like,
a lab and you can study them.
yeah,
Kind of comes off
so-
as an Arkham Asylum for AI or something
Right.
like that. I mean, they
Yeah.
get locked away. They get locked away, but they're not killing them right off because I guess maybe that's sort of amoral.
It's kind of acknowledging that they're sentient.
yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder if it's maybe a lab, like maybe they're in there, but they're gonna, you know.
But
pass
do they
study.
have like do they allow them to like redeem themselves in there? Is there room for redemption in AI jail? Like, can someone convince the people running it to think like, oh yeah, this AI is changed
Well,
without like,
But
yeah.
what you're calling the jail seems to be the Daystrom Institute because it looks
Yeah.
exactly
Right.
like when you see it in Picard.
Mhm. Probably is the Daystrom Institute.
Yeah.
Most likely.
In which case they've got programmers and stuff there, so yeah, they'd be prepared to sort of tweak the programming or whatever. Like
Yeah.
they store, like I'm remembering, like they stored before there, for example. Well, I think
Oh,
that was
right.
after he was dismantled and stuff. Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
maybe they do just dismantle the rest of them as well, like they did with before.
Maybe they're in there till their batteries run out and their power runs out, and then they can study them.
Mhm.
Because you didn't see
It
any
kinda
power
seems-
cables.
Yeah. It did kind of seem like when they pulled back a little bit, like I was remembering the last time, like when they locked Agnes up in there, I was actually looking for particular computers that were there before because their designs were interesting. They had one, I think, like there's one that kind of looked like Batman, one whose lights looked like the CBS logo, and one that I swear I saw that looked like a starship.
Yes, I saw that too,
Yes.
and I'm like, did I, what was in, what did I have? Is this something that's from my weekend partying, or is this actually there?
Yeah, and they didn't have all of those in this one, so I think something's going on there. Maybe they're taking them apart. Maybe I can't see why they would relocate them, but they seem to be doing something with them. Pardon me. Anyway, interesting plot point. What do you think would have happened if Peanut had actually gotten the Borg involved?
I thought it was interesting that they were even calibrated to do so, to call on the Borg. Like, how would they know how would they know their number essentially?
Right.
To me, it just helped put more nails in the coffin of this like character and any chance of redemption for him. Like, just
Yeah.
she's gonna reach out to one of the most nasty technological like entities in the galaxy. Like, yeah, geez, you really are a rotten little machine, aren't you?
It almost sounds like she's trying to make like the ultimate threat, like when you're in an argument with somebody and it's going nowhere and you got to win. And so it kind of like in a breakup argument almost, well, if you're going to be like that, I'm going to leave you type of like picking up. That's her biggest weapon in her arsenal that she's trying to scare them with at this point. Like it seems more like she's trying to do it to be like, you do that to me. Well, I'm going to do this to you because I can do this. And with the Borg being the big baddies, and her being a technological being, the Borg will want to study her. That's a given. But I think it was more like she's just using it as a threat, like, look at what I can do. Like maybe she can't even contact the Borg. She puts her antenna up, but we don't know if she can contact the Borg.
Yeah, it's like nuclear deterrence. Like we'll shoot a nuclear missile, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of like the almost like USA and Russia during the Cold War. Like, if you do it well, then we'll do this, and you've got 10 of these, so we've got 20 of these. Like,
but at the same time, I don't think it would necessarily be that difficult for like a signal to be sent from like Starfleet or the Federation to Borg space because like they intercepted or at least detected the message that was sent in Regeneration and Enterprise. It just took ages for the message to be sent. So I think like even if a message was sent, probably the message would take ages to get to its destination. So yeah, I don't think like anything would happen even if she did contact the Borg.
And also like the Borg may not want to assimilate the Cerritos and this bird planet. Like it assumes that they would, but maybe not because, they hadn't even heard of them until that point. So
kind of
Yeah,
like the
mostly-
meme with the Paclids.
Yeah.
The Borg and the Paclid meme. It's like, we want things that make us go, never mind, we don't want to assimilate you.
That's like
Well, you
them
know,
with that was like them with the Kazon. They're like, yeah, they weren't worth assimilating, so we just left them behind. It's like, yeah, discount Cardassia wouldn't be worth assimilating.
I wonder
Well,
if that's going to be an insult in the future. Like, you're so dumb the Borg wouldn't assimilate you or something.
Nice. Yeah, but once you've assimilated the captain of, the flagship of the Federation, everything else is just trading down.
Yeah. Although that could be also how you would have the ability to contact the Borg, because you got to remember there was Locutus. They'd have the information from that. There was Lore and his Borg experiments.
Gosh.
And then depending where Voyager is at this point, 7 of 9 and Icheb. So there's plenty of connections to Borg there that they could have used. So it is possible in a way.
I mean, they're clearly doing something, because when you get to Picard, like, the Stargazer has Borg technology in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And since we're on the subject, so Star Trek's done the whole organic versus inorganic or tech-based life forms. How do you guys think this episode holds up against similar ones like that?
I think like Peanut Hamper used their sort of abilities to ingratiate themselves to the tribe, and and it didn't do it in a way where it's like, oh, it didn't like Peanut Hamper didn't have the attitude that, oh, you're lesser than, but when push comes to shove, when the chips are down and she's in a corner, like, to mix metaphors, she definitely brings up the I'm a machine and I can do this kind of thing as like a threat. But I don't really see like this episode necessarily having the same tone as like ones where machines are like, there was that one episode of TOS where Kirk encounters a machine that's like, well, it's not logical for you to be alive, so I'm just going to kill you kind of thing. It's not so myopically single-minded. Peanut Hamper's a much more dynamic, alive character.
To me, this reminded me of, and I have to thank Dan for remembering the title, Revulsion in Voyager, with the crazy the hologram that's essentially gone insane. And the attitude he has towards B'Elanna the whole time when he's talking to the doctor, like, his attitude reminded me a lot of Peanut Hamper. Kind of like if you basically made him female and stuffed him in a metal ball. Just the whole I'm superior, like the superiority complex, and the, you can't control me because I'm not weak like you, I'm not fragile like you, I'm not this. Like, to me, that was the first one of those type of episodes that popped into my mind, was the insane hologram, for lack of a better term, and seeing how that one played out. Because I mean, just like Peanut Hamper was going to, like Peanut Hamper was going to go rogue and, I'll call the Borg and everything. Just like that hologram tried to murder B'Elanna after he murdered his crew.
Desjardins,
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that, the wherever jail of AIs, I thought, does that maybe lead on to? But no, I don't think it will, because it's too big of a leap to lead on to like the AIs that we've seen from the future and in Discovery season 2 and then Picard season 1.
Those AIs seem dumbed down by comparison, to be honest.
Yeah, but like evolution can take place, as you just watched
So do you think that these are like planting seeds for like the synth war that's coming? Is that what you're trying to say?
That could be fun.
Interesting.
Escalation.
Robot wars.
Basically.
BattleBots.
That's a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think in terms of like organic, inorganic thing, I thought a lot of the founders, the way they kind of talk down to species that differ from them, like very much with that attitude of superiority. Like, I can do things you can't do, and it makes me amazing, and you'll never understand what I know. And
Well, the
she's kind of
crystal
like carries that attitude around a bit here too, where she's like, I'm a machine. I can do incredible things. You don't have a clue. You people are just a bunch of hay seeds.
kind of like the crystalline entity then.
Well, yeah, it sort of reminds me of Lore, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Lore had the superiority complex that Data didn't have.
Okay, let's ask a super serious question here. Is this episode an argument for or against the Prime Directive?
As far as not interfering, absolutely. Like, just not messing around with folks you're not totally, aren't part of the Federation, aren't involved in this huge institution. She could have demonstrated literally any discretion, but of course that would have led to no plot, no story. So of course there has to be conflict and resolution and that kind of thing. But like, I do
probably
think
wouldn't have been that in character for her either.
right, exactly, yes.
Yeah.
But she was disenfranchised from Starfleet enough to I guess justify not following that. But I do think leaving people alone just generally I think it is definitely an argument for.
Kind of like Who Watches the Watchers in TNG when they accidentally get revealed. Or if we want to go to the Orville, there's that one episode with the Kelly. And Kelly ends up becoming a religion because she saved somebody.
When people
didn't that happen
mention
with
Who
Picard
Watches,
too?
Also, when Lamar humps the statue on the like the planet with the like social media thing where they upvote, downvote, and he goes to jail for it.
But when people talk about Who Watches the Watchers, I often remember like Insurrection because they're very similar, like the start of Insurrection.
Although with Insurrection, it was revealed that they knew of warp technology, they just chose not to pursue it.
Eventually.
And see, that's perfect. That ties right into this because this culture also possessed technology previously.
That just seems more like a technicality because they clearly weren't aware.
But it's exactly the same thing as Insurrection. They gave up the technology willingly. They possessed it.
I agree with that, but I'm saying as far as like the Prime Directive is concerned, like Peanut Hamper was like, oh, I guess I didn't break it, but that's really only a technicality. They weren't using it anymore. So I still think it should have been followed.
Well, because it seems like they would want to be left alone if they're not using the technology. Like, because what would be the reason to have technology like that and not use it? You want to be left alone. Because we see that even in the Delta Quadrant, certain species chose not to have visible technology because it attracted the Borg.
Yep.
That's true. Okay, I don't know if we've kind of gone over this, but let's bring it back. How does Peanut Hamper stack up against other evil Trek machines?
Yeah, we sort of talked about that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry.
Okay. No problem. We'll move on. This one's kind of similar, actually. Okay, so considering what the evil machine trope implies about the humans that create them, what does Peanut Hamper say about the crew of Lower Decks? I mean, personally, I would say nothing because they didn't create her, and exocomps have existed for a while at this point, but it's open to discussion.
Yeah, see, that's just part of like the reason I just didn't really, this, like you say, the episode kind of feels like it's almost go nowhere because a lot of developments with this character and the technology and like the ethics of what she did and like all this stuff. It's like, I mean, it deals with like, Starfleet issues, but not really in a context that matters to the crew or Peanut Hamper. What happens to her doesn't really relate much back to her because, like in the end, she goes to jail, so they're not really dealing with her after this. So,
unless they're going for, I kind of thought maybe they could be going for a thing of like, no matter how bad the Fab Four are, there's always worse.
They do present some really bad examples of like humanity or other aliens or something that try to contrast them a little and be like, okay, these guys might be kind of like, nonchalant B team, but they're not scumbags.
But yeah, I have to agree with you, Mike. I don't really think that it really, there's not really much there because she wasn't even really part of it. We've never seen her before, so she obviously doesn't even hang out with the Lower Decks crew.
I think
transfers in and just kind of transfers in, and then she's gone by the end of that episode, and then you're into the subject matter of what this one deals with, and yeah, like you say, you don't get much with the character.
I mean, like I do think, going back all the way back to like Frankenstein, this kind of sci-fi trope of like an evil creation is really meant to be a mirror on others. And I just wonder, like, well, who is this a reflection on? Because it's as Mike pointed out, this is an adaptable AI. And, she had the opportunity, a golden opportunity, to be completely on a different wavelength and being a giving, kind, good addition to a community, and completely turn her back on that. So it's like, what about the creator does that say? Because, she was programmed to be like this. So it's like,
I gotta
why?
wonder if it was Dr. Zimmerman who programmed her, because she does, some of her attitude is quite reminiscent of Voyager's Doctor in the early days.
True.
And some of the generic Mark II EMH holograms. So I almost wondered for a minute there when I was watching, I'm like, did Dr. Zimmerman have a hand in this? Because she certainly sounds like his bad attitude.
Like God,
Maybe?
God, like it says in the Bible that like God created man in his own image. And I think like this trope is like an extension of that. So it's like, again, maybe I'm thinking way too hard about this. But like the self-centeredness, these are all very human traits. These aren't unique to machines. That's all.
But also, like, I think, like, it sort of came across to me as like mistakes can happen. It's like I really much doubt that like Dr. Noonien Singh like really like wanted like lore to turn out like he did. And so, like, it wouldn't surprise me if this was another example of that sort of thing.
I mean, like, Noonien Singh was also kind of a jerk face, a little bit. He wasn't exactly a nice person.
Yeah, I think he very much was.
Now that you've mentioned Dr. Noonien Singh, now I'm thinking about how it was said many times about his augments, superior intellect breeds superior ambition breeds and goes from there. So you just reminded me of that.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I think I'd like to find out who Peanut Hamper's dad is, the one she said she joined Starfleet to piss off.
Yeah, like who? Yeah, who's your daddy? Who's your daddy? That sounds
yes.
Sorry.
Who's your daddy?
Sorry, but
okay. So how was she able to replicate a hypospray with a vaccine that was adapted for the biology of this uncontested species?
Uncontacted, probably.
Uncontacted. Sorry, I didn't read that right.
Let's see. No, it's spelled as uncontested, but I think it's supposed to be uncontacted.
Probably like her
sense, yeah.
Probably her sensor suite that was built into her could allow her to synthesize something based off what she was detecting from them. Because I don't know, it just shows that, like, I mean, I remember that TNG episode with the exocomps. They're quite versatile with the tools and the abilities they have. So I mean, her having the ability to analyze their species and then produce something that could affect them, it doesn't seem too far-fetched to me.
Does she have a medical tricorder built in? Because that's what would be required.
That's
like,
yeah.
I think that those exocomps are like mission standard, so they get packed out with whatever they need to do. Right? Engineering ones, engineering stuff. Medical ones, medical stuff. Science ones, science stuff. So I mean, the way they were so modular was pretty neat. I mean, I got to say, the machines themselves are pretty neat. This particular one is kind of garbage with legs, but I mean, they're usually pretty useful and helpful. This one, not so much.
I did like the design where they added the blue with the badge on her. That was kind of neat, to be honest.
And she has the same little white booties, like her white booties, just like Tandy has.
Yeah, that I thought was cute, because when she first came on screen, I'm like, oh, that's cute. It's an exocomp in clothes.
She's got a little uniform bottom.
Because we know that, like, being a mechanical being, she's really not going to care what she looks like on the outside to that extent.
Yeah, that's like in Prometheus. It's like the one scientist he's asking, he's like, "Why do you wear the suit, Dave?" And he's like, "So I look like you."
Or like when little Q goes and he snaps Seven's clothes away, and he's like, "Aren't you going to make a vain attempt to cover yourself?" And she's just kind of like, "Why? Why?"
Yeah,
Speaking,
I don't care.
Speaking about Voyager, yeah, like she has reminded me of other like AIs. Like there's a missile thing in Voyager that they actually operate on. There's also I think they're called Kraylon Wars and stuff. Again, they're like androids rather than. But yeah, there's I think it might be called Prototype or something like that, where the bomb is the missile. Yeah.
That
The
one's
bomb
called
is the missile.
I think that one's Warhead, isn't it?
Yeah, Warhead. Yeah,
Oh.
thanks.
And then the other one you're talking about, that's the one where B'Elanna fixes the two species of
And
robots and they resume the
that's called
war.
Prototype.
They resume the war after they've like pretty much extincted. They both sides of the robots have extincted their own people, and now they're fighting the war like proxies, still fighting the war. It's just like, yeah, that I like B'Elanna episodes in Voyager. That one appealed to me a lot because she gets into like asking questions about like, is it right or wrong that she turned this robot back on? Then you find out about this terrible war, and she's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to destroy them all now. It's just like...
Okay, so others have pointed out similarities between this episode and like the TOS episode, the Paradise Syndrome, or the movie Avatar. What do you guys think?
Paradise Syndrome, not so much, because Kirk, to be fair, and I hate that episode, but Kirk, to be fair, didn't really know what was happening. He'd had this obelisk or whatever that kind of wiped his memory. So Kirk really didn't enter with any. He had no idea who he even was at that point. So he was kind of, to a point, Kirk was kind of innocent, whereas this exocomp is anything but, because she knows what she's doing and she's doing it deliberately. Whereas Kirk was a complete accident.
Yeah.
And we also don't have somebody knocked up who gets killed at the end.
Right. Yeah, kind of like, what's that, Dan, you probably know, the episode title, that TNG episode where Data beams down to a planet and loses his memory.
Oh, I was going to say that one too.
Forks and torches on him.
And he loses it. Gets
Yeah.
He gets electrocuted and he's like shorts out. Yeah, I can't remember anything. They're like, the frozen man. I love that lady in the village. It's like, he's the ice man. It's like, I love her botchy sideways attempts at science.
I actually thought, sorry.
Oh, he improves her microscope, just blows her mind. He's like, yeah, I just put like 6 of them in a line and it made it way better. She's like, oh, wow, that's brilliant.
I actually thought that what was striking about this to me was that this episode was so much to me like the Paradise Syndrome, with all of the things that made the Paradise Syndrome awful taken out. We're not having this like, racist stereotype on display for the entire time that you're just having to like put in the back of your head so you can like, it removes the things that make it unwatchable. The weird racist stereotype, the Indian princess stereotype, all that stuff. It's just a goofy robot that comes across an owl people instead of like Native Americans, and like, falls in love, is almost about to get married, which again happens in the Paradise Syndrome.
That's not what makes that episode groan-worthy for me. It's the parallel Earth thing that they beat to death in TOS. Oh,
yeah.
Every planet's not Earth. Ah!
Well, that's. I think that was like budget constraints and other things.
That's the same reason. That's the same reason with the minorities too. They're putting like brown face on people. It's just not cool, man. Hire an ethnic person, but it's budget again. It's always down to cost, right?
Yeah. And the thing is, for its time, like Paradise Syndrome in its own time would have been less cringe because of the attitudes. I'm not saying it's right then, and it wasn't right, but based on the attitudes of the time, it doesn't really stand out from anything else from that era as being, it's no more or less cringy than, say, a John Wayne film.
That's more cringe. That's more cringe.
Not only did they put white people in red face, they also made Native Americans as somebody behind the wall of the Prime Directive, meaning that they took away their status as human beings. That's why they didn't tell them about the asteroid. They're like, oh, we can't mess with a developing civilization. Whereas like with this, they're owl people. They're obviously very not in the Federation. They're not even human. So it makes sense. Like that was so, it's like they took the same premise, the same ethical issue, and took out all the poison out of the Paradise Syndrome. That's what this episode seemed like to me anyway.
Except for they added a whole bunch of gray to it because they're like, oh, but they used to be warp. And then it's like, oh, well then technically it's not really a violation of the Prime Directive anymore. So it gets into a weird gray zone where it's like, is it right or is it wrong? There's no definitive answer considering the history behind these people and the way the Prime Directive reads. It's really weird in relation to it.
But it does like the Prime Directive actually doesn't read at all. It's never actually written down anywhere. It's just sort of like applied on a case by case basis, depending on who's the captain, basically.
Wasn't that the whole point of Enterprise, though? Was that because of what happened in Enterprise, they write the Prime Directive? Yeah, I was pretty sure that.
Yeah, he actually says in Enterprise, one day my people will have something like a Prime Directive, and it becomes it's General Order 1. So it is.
I don't love the show, but it's the basis of the Prime Directive.
The name changes from General Order 1 to the Prime Directive in Strange New World, and you see it written down on Janeway's desktop computer in Voyager.
So it is written down, something like that. Something like that.
I'd like to read that. I didn't know that.
I'll be honest though, I got way more of Avatar out of this because as soon as I saw these like owl people, the long tails, the way they live, the way they are, because in Avatar too, it's not that they're ignorant of technologies and things. It's just their life works the way it is and they're happy.
Right down to incompatible mating practices.
Yes,
how are our parts going to connect? Like it's just, that's right in Avatar. Boom.
Yeah, people actually saw that. For me, it was just the visuals. Like I've seen like the visual stuff from Avatar. It's like the post-coital glow between Peanut Hamper and Rodwa is all like brightly lit, and I was like, this seems really familiar.
Yeah, just the whole primeval forest setting. Yeah, very much Avatar.
I honestly thought that the whole mating thing at one point would be him sticking his tail in the front thing on the exocomp because I was thinking Avatar is so bad where they do it with their tails or whatever that connect. Vanessa's just dying up there, but
it was pretty cheesy, man. Like it Blue was. Pocahontas, man. Blue Pocahontas. It was killing me.
At least
tech demo. It was really cool special effects. I'll give it that.
It was, but it was like, when with the Avatar side of it, that's what I was thinking was like, okay, because in Avatar it was the tails, so like, well, he's got a tail, and they're basic like the bird, like he's got a tail, she's got this port on the front. Like, please don't go there. Like, I was hoping they wouldn't because I'm like. And again, something like that
with lower decks. Yeah, no doubt. You might wonder.
A very censored Boimler's little Boimler. It wouldn't have been out of question for this show.
His not so bold Boimler.
I like that. I'm betting it was pretty bold, and that's why it was censored.
Yeah, right.
Are you okay, Vanessa? You look like you're dying up there.
I'm okay. Thank you for checking.
Okay, so why might the sky snake be called a sky snake and not just a snake? I mean, it was established, didn't they say like everything on the planet had wings, like everything could fly?
Yeah, pigs had wings.
Yeah, I think that was the joke.
I wondered if it had been that way all the time, or if maybe they'd originally like encountered like a ground crawling snake and like maybe they'd wiped it out of existence or whatever, to extinction, and so the only ones that were left are sky snakes.
What about if it had some sort of significance to them? Because I mean, they're deadly and they fear them, and we don't really know much about their spiritual practices. What if it's called a sky snake because it's part of their, like, it exists, but maybe it's part of their mythos or their spirituality, in that maybe it's like they see it as more of an evil god or something. So that's why they call it a sky snake.
Well, that was what I immediately thought of, because I thought of that Kulikan reference or whatever from the episode of a little while back. And I'm like, hey, wait a second. Sky serpent? Huh?
Yeah, like I'm wondering if that specific designation and the fact that they don't really answer the question when it's asked, to me that implied that there could be something in their spiritual mythos or whatever, because it's not unheard. Like serpents of all kinds are pretty common in most major religious backgrounds and most major religious tomes. We see a lot of things about serpents. They're always evil. They're always killer, you know? So I honestly wonder if if that's part of it, if they see it as almost like some kind of, you know, avenging deity or something to a point.
I thought it was just a way to differentiate them from like a ground snake, if they have all those. But like you said, all the animals have wings, so
yeah. Okay. Okay, so do you think the animated format has helped with creating more diversity in aliens and places, you know, over the live action with CGI and makeup? I mean, obviously it's cheaper, but
I'll fully agree, because like on TAS, they even admitted in that show, like during this production back in that, like when I remember watching, I think it was The Center Seat, and they had an episode where they dealt with the production of the animated series, and they had more freedom because, you know, you're not constrained by makeup costs or having to have an actor in the role. You can just simply use the existing voice cast, have somebody make a voice for that character, and draw a new alien. So, I mean, it's the kind of same freedom that they have here with Lower Decks. It's like you can definitely come up with some really interesting alien types, and then as long as you've got a voice actor in mind for the role, like you can come up with all kinds of different stuff for types of aliens you want to show. They've shown a lot of, like, you know, anthropomorphized animals in a way where they, you know, typically didn't show that a lot in like live action because it just costs a lot of money to create that kind of effect in a live action environment.
I think the fact that like this animation too, like now with the way animation is and stuff, probably is a little bit cheaper to produce the episodes, which is probably why they feel more free to experiment. Because you're not having to be like, okay, what if we spend all this time and money, you know, we'll spend 8 hours in a makeup chair like poor Saru or something to make this alien, and then what if the episode totally bombs? Well, we've wasted all that time and money building this alien without knowing that it's going to succeed. Whereas if you come up with a planet of aliens or whatever in an animated format and they don't work, big deal. You just delete the file and move on.
I really enjoyed, like, as far as this concept goes, how like they've been using, you know, drawing and art and computer generated stuff to sort of like push the envelope as far as alien design. Rotok from Prodigy, that's my favorite, because it's like they're so huge creature, but has a little baby girl voice. I love that. I love that so much.
Okay, so final question, one we always end with. How many rank pips out of 5 would you give this episode?
Definitely 5.
Dan giving 5?
I gotta be honest, I agree with him.
I gotta go buy a lottery ticket now.
I've been really good with the past couple episodes, but this one, it's getting a 3. Like, I just nope.
Okay.
This one's getting a 4 from me. It would get a 3, but it has Jeffrey Combs.
That's fair. Yeah, absolutely going to give it a 5 though, because, you know, we were asking, you know, can they make a good episode that doesn't focus on the Fab Four? And yeah, I feel like this was a good episode. I enjoyed the storyline and the plot. I'm going to admit it. The first time I watched it, Peanut Hamper's redemption arc totally had me. I had totally believed that she had turned over a new leaf, and then they're showing the passage of time, and she's obviously come to be part of this tribe.
Where did they come up with the ridiculous name, by the way? Is it
No
random
idea.
or is there a connection?
It's just a joke that comes out in no small parts. So it's like, yeah, my name's Peanut Hamper. And then it's like, then Tendy's like, Peanut Hamper? I love it! Like, it just turns around on it right away. You're thinking, she's going to hate it or something.
I actually thought it was a 5 pipper myself. I think this was really solid. I actually really appreciate that we had an arc. We had a story being told. And even though it sort of like undermined at the very end, we had like Peanut Hamper actually did things that are pretty, things that would convince you that they turned a new leaf. Like, like there were hardships that they endured. Like there was a wound that one of them got, and they're like, well, once you get bitten by a sky snake, that's kind of it. And they're like, oh, here's a hypo spray.
Yeah.
There you go. That's actually helping somebody. And like the hatching of the chicks, they're like, well, we just kind of lose some, and that's just part of it. And they're like, why? I can help you hatch all of them. And that was like the first time that ever happened for them. So that's like community building. That's not just like being nice for the sake of being nice. It's actually like a selfless act. She's not getting anything out of it really, except like they might see her as more of the community because she's actually like palpably contributing. And at the very end, it was her all along messing with things, calling on that alien race to come.
That's just the thing.
Yeah,
that's why I end up. That's why I end up at 3 pips, because it's this character doesn't redeem herself, and this plot line means nothing to any of the serialized development in the show. It's just an episodic diversion, an episodic diversion to nowhere. That really doesn't move the show anywhere. It doesn't move the show anywhere. And that's kind of where I get stuck with it. I think it's the one aspect of the show that is serialized is the character development. And this doesn't really deal with any of the serialized character development. That's why I get stuck with it.
I'm going to throw this out there. I don't think she was community building. I don't really think there was much there that was altruistic in her motives. I think a lot of it was a combination of showing off because she's arrogant. And these people are finally giving her what she wants, which is recognition that she's so cool. And I believe some of it was self-preservation.
Worship.
In culture like that, if she was going to go around being the evil snark she was, what's to stop them from destroying her? So I think there was more. I think it was more she was doing it for herself. And the fact that it benefited them is a side effect.
Oh yeah, when they're worshiping her, she's just loving the adulation when they get to that part.
Peanut Hamper.
Other than like, I mean, palpably materially, does the exocomp even really need them at all? I don't really think so. She could have just gone off on her own.
Do you know who Peanut Hamper is? Jaime Lannister. Started out as an arrogant jerk, spent this entire episode redeeming herself, and then blew it up right at the end. Basically, she did the entire Jaime Lannister character arc from Game of Thrones, but in one episode instead of 8 seasons.
And that kills me because I was hoping he was going to redeem himself too. Right. So like, you got me, Scott, right there. Yeah, like this is like the same thing. It's like this journey with her, and you're like, yeah, she's going to turn a new leaf, and then she goes and just shits on everybody. And I was like, to hell with her.
Like,
yeah, no, I do think her ego played into it, because the more they worshipped her, the more she did. Yeah, and she loved it, because that was her half of her beef with the Cerritos, was nobody was treating her like she was anything special and amazing.
Couldn't acknowledge how great I am. She says that a few times.
And he did.
So that's why I think there was some ego at play there.
Yeah. Sorry, what were you going to say, Dan?
I think that maybe her programming's starting to change, and that she's growing a what do you call it? A conscience.
If she's growing a conscience, she's ignoring it.
Yeah.
I think she's there's the very initial signs of her growing a conscience, but I don't, it's not a completed process. But I think that's why I value the episodes as a transitional point before we see the next one that she'll be in. Probably
she's sitting in jail. She's gonna sit in jail and wonder about that moral failure.
I don't think she'll be there for long.
I think
not if she's teaming up with Agami.
I sure hope we don't see this character ever again, personally.
Yeah, I will say one of the things that led me to go with 5 pips is I found almost nothing to nitpick about this episode, but there was just this one tiny little thing that nobody's actually touched on. I thought it was a little too convenient that the Fab Four, as we've been calling them, had apparently all pulled bridge duty at the same time that Peanut Hamper's distress call came in. Felt that was just a little bit of, remember all these characters, they're part of this show too, so we got to get them all in the same place. And
yeah, because you wouldn't typically have 4 lower deckers all on the bridge at once. I mean, we only ever see 1 or 2 ensigns on the bridge. And
Yeah,
Harry
Have any lines.
would have just made more sense to have him show up at the landing party, like you say, not just all on the bridge when the call comes in or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'd like to thank all of our panelists for joining the discussion. We hope you, our viewers, enjoyed it. Let us know in the comments section what you thought about this episode. Please remember to like and subscribe to the video, and we will see you next time.